The blue glow from the monitor was the only light in the room. Mia Thompson stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the mouse. The cursor sat steady on the word upload. She clicked. The progress bar crawled forward, pixel by pixel, until it snapped to completion. She leaned back, the chair creaking in the stillness of the house. Her phone screen lit up, showing the analytics tab. 0 views, 0 followers. Not a single notification pinged to break the heavy silence of the bedroom. She refreshed the page. Still nothing. The air in the room felt thin, stagnant, and entirely indifferent to the effort she had just spent hours perfecting. She looked at her reflection in the darkened glass of the window, a faint shape against the city skyline outside. The decision was made, the data was sent, and now the waiting began. She did not reach for her phone again. She simply sat there, watching the clock tick, listening to the hum of the cooling fan as the only sign that her life had just shifted into a new, unknown gear. The bedroom remained perfectly quiet, holding the weight of her first step into the void. The next day, Mia cleared a space on her small desk. She did not hunt for viral audio or dance sequences. She pulled a notepad from her drawer, tore off a page, and wrote down a single, practical tip. She set her phone on a stack of books, framed the shot, and tapped record. She spoke for 3 minutes, explaining the logic clearly, without cuts or filters. When she finished, she reviewed the clip. It was plain. It was honest. She uploaded it. Outside, the world moved fast, chasing whatever caught the eye for a fleeting moment. But Mia kept her focus on the frame. She repeated the process daily. Prep the desk, write the tip, record, post. The process became a rhythm, a steady pulse in the quiet of her apartment. She tracked no viral metrics. She checked no comment sections. Every evening, she would reset the desk, move the lamp to the correct angle, and prepare the next explanation. She was building a library of utility. She found a specific, rhythmic piece in the work itself, ignoring the lack of immediate feedback. The screen remained mostly dark. The view count stayed low, but she did not change her approach. She simply moved to the next tip, steady and deliberate, refining the way she articulated her ideas, one video at a time. The nights grew longer as the weeks stretched into months. Mia sat in the same chair, the screen's glow casting long shadows against the walls. She tapped the refresh icon. The number remained stubbornly at single digits. She watched the cursor blink, waiting for a comment or a share that never arrived. The silence in the apartment was heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic outside. She stood up, walked to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water, her movements slow and deliberate. Every night followed the same pattern. She would finish a recording, edit it with precision, and upload it to an audience that seemed not to exist. She stared at the analytics dashboard, watching the lines remain flat. It was a test of endurance, a quiet war against the temptation to chase fleeting trends. She did not look at other accounts that had gained traction overnight. She returned to her desk, adjusted her lamp, and began researching the next topic. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, steady and ready to type. She was not seeking quick validation. She was planting seeds in a desert, knowing the ground was dry but refusing to stop digging. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet, then opened them and started the next draft. The dashboard stayed empty, but she stayed at her post. Seasons cycled past the bedroom window, marked by the changing tilt of the sun and the thickening dust on her bookshelf. 2 years condensed into a blur of rhythmic repetition. Mia wore out the keys on her laptop, the letters fading from the plastic. She watched the digital landscape shift rapidly around her. Other creators pivoted daily, chasing the latest dance, the loudest sound, the most provocative edit. They surged in popularity, then vanished as quickly as they appeared. Mia observed their patterns, the frantic energy of their edits, and then turned back to her own work. She did not chase the algorithm. She did not change the length of her videos to suit the shifting attention spans of the platform. She kept the same frame. She kept the same tone. Her subscriber count moved in agonizingly small increments, sometimes stalling for weeks, sometimes dropping, but she never missed a day. She replaced her microphone when the cord frayed and taped the leg of her desk when it began to wobble. She became a fixture of the platform, a steady, unchanging presence in a sea of volatility. The world outside the screen moved with frantic speed, but inside her room, time was measured only by the steady, persistent accumulation of content. She was still digging, still planting, and still waiting for the first sign of rain. The breakthrough did not come from a viral video. It came from a worn book on her shelf. Mia opened it to a marked page and read the line again. The ability to sacrifice immediate pleasure for future rewards is a foundation of success. She stared at the words until they burned into her focus. She looked at her laptop. Her notes were filled with strategies for cheap engagement, tactics designed to trigger instant likes at the cost of long-term substance. She highlighted the list, deleted it, and closed the file. The temptation to pivot for a quick spike in viewership had been a constant itch, but the quote provided a hard boundary. She realized that her lack of fame was not a failure of strategy, but a period of accumulation. She began to view her time as capital. Every hour spent editing was not just content creation, but a deposit into an account that would only pay out years later. The silence in the room no longer felt like a void. It felt like a foundation. She adjusted her posture, ignored the urge to check the analytics for the 100th time, and started a new script. The shift was internal, but the impact was absolute. She was no longer waiting for a reward. She was building the mechanism that would eventually generate one. It started with a single notification, then two, then a continuous chime that bled into a steady, vibrating drone against the wood of her desk. Mia reached for her phone, but the screen was already scrolling too fast to read. The numbers beneath her latest post were not climbing, they were leaping. Thousands of views joined the count every time she blinked. The algorithm had finally caught the signal she had been broadcasting for years. The dormant momentum of her library of videos collided with a sudden, massive wave of public interest. Her phone grew warm in her palm, the battery draining as it struggled to process the relentless stream of new interactions. She stood up, paced the small radius of the room, and sat back down. The silence that had defined her workspace for 2 years was shattered. Every refresh brought a new surge of comments, shares, and follows that filled the empty space with a sudden, frantic weight. She watched the dashboard metrics turn from stagnant gray lines into vertical spikes of color. The room felt smaller, charged with the energy of a million unseen eyes. She did not reach for the camera. She did not try to record a reaction. She simply sat, watched the metrics climb, and realized the engine had finally caught fire. The digital frenzy eventually slowed to a steady hum. Weeks later, a thick envelope arrived in the mailbox. Mia took it to the kitchen table, her hands steady despite the rapid rhythm of her heart. She slit the paper, pulled out the document, and unfolded it. The amount listed was higher than her annual earnings from her retail job. She stared at the figures, the ink crisp and official against the white page. It was no longer just a digital metric or a spike on a dashboard. It was liquid capital. She laid the check flat on the wood, a physical anchor to the past 2 years of silence and effort. The shock hit her in a wave, not of excitement, but of profound validation. She remembered the nights she had recorded in the dark, the drafts she had deleted, and the skepticism of those who saw her work as a waste of time. Now, the proof was in her hand. She traced the numbers with a fingertip. The check was not just money, it was the first fruit of a long-term harvest. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the street below. The world outside remained unchanged, but her position within it had fundamentally shifted. She had the means to act, to change her trajectory, and to prove that the long, quiet wait had been worth the cost. The mailbox check was only the beginning. Within days, the notifications on her device became a constant, rhythmic pulse. Every hour brought new partnership requests, messages from agencies, and comments from strangers who suddenly cared about her every move. The phone no longer felt like a tool. It felt like a tether. She watched the follower count drift upward, a relentless climb that promised more reach, more influence, and more noise. The temptation to lean into the spectacle was tangible. She could see the path clearly, record a video of her reaction, showcase the sudden luxury, and play the part the audience expected. It would be so easy to let the momentum carry her into a life of public performance. She opened her camera app, the lens dark and reflecting her own face, and hesitated. The urge to broadcast the change was a physical itch, a desire to be seen and validated by the thousands waiting for her next move. She set the phone down, face down on the desk, and listened to the vibrations against the wood. The world was watching, waiting for her to step into the light, but the noise was beginning to drown out the very discipline that had brought her here in the first place. The pressure was no longer just digital. It arrived in person, through friends who had started tracking her growth with more focus than she did. They sat around her kitchen table, phones out, swiping to her profile and then to their own banking apps. "Look at those numbers," one said, tapping the screen until the glass clicked. "You are sitting on a fortune." They pointed to the rising balance, the pending sponsorship deals, and the sheer volume of her reach. It was a language of immediate conversion. They spoke of showrooms, of luxury vehicles, and of the specific brands she should be seen in to solidify her status. They treated her bank balance like a lottery win that was currently going to waste. "Why are you still driving that old car?" they asked. "And why is your life still so quiet?" They wanted to see the transformation in real time. They wanted the spectacle. Mia watched them scroll through sites, clicking on high-end items and holding the screens up as if they were blueprints for her future. She looked at the flashing digits on their phones, then back at the simple, worn table she had worked at for 2 years. Every suggestion they made was an invitation to spend, to display, and to surrender the very capital that had taken so much time to accumulate. Left to her own devices, Mia opened the browsers her friends had mentioned, the screens filled with high-gloss imagery. Sleek, low-profile vehicles with price tags that exceeded her first 3 years of earnings. Rows of labels that promised instant social recognition. She scrolled through a curated list of designer items, the interface designed to make the purchase feel like a single, effortless tap. For a moment, she let the images take hold. She imagined the sensation of stepping into that kind of visibility, the ease of simply adopting the persona that the internet now demanded of her. She clicked a button, and the item moved into a digital cart. The screen flashed a confirmation. It felt like a trap wrapped in velvet. She looked at the total, the number representing months of focused, repetitive work, and then looked at the sleek, depreciating asset on the screen. The urge to conform was a heavy, persistent weight. She hovered her cursor over the checkout button, the cursor blinking in sync with her own heartbeat. She took a slow breath, moved the mouse to the top corner of the window, and closed the tab. The room returned to its quiet state. The screen was blank again, and the temptation vanished with the closing of the browser. The notification pinged again. Another 5-figure deposit landed, pushing her balance into a territory that felt abstract, almost unreal. Before Mia could even process the number, her phone vibrated with messages from the same group. They were not just watching her progress anymore, they were choreographing it. A friend leaned over, eyes wide, pointing at the dashboard. "You have enough now to change everything," the friend insisted, voice tight with urgency. "Why are you hoarding it?" They spoke in terms of optics, of the necessity of maintaining the illusion of success to secure even larger deals. They saw the money as a tool for projection, while she saw it as a foundation for independence. The room felt smaller as they crowded around, their expectations pressing in from every side. They were not just asking her to buy things, they were asking her to change her identity. Every suggestion was a demand to conform to the image they had built for her. Mia felt the weight of their gaze, the collective pressure to perform a lifestyle she had no interest in leading. She remained seated, her hands resting on her desk, as the noise of their expectations filled the space. The divide between her quiet path and their demand for a spectacle had never been wider. The door clicked shut, leaving the room in a sudden, ringing silence. Mia stood alone. The air felt thick, charged with the phantom echoes of their demands. She looked at her phone, still vibrating on the desk with fresh alerts, links to luxury catalogs, invitations to exclusive events, and endless commentary on what she should do next. Every notification was a lure. She stood at the center of her room, pacing the length of the floorboards. To her left, the easy path. Spend, display, and earn the immediate, fleeting applause of the crowd. It would be simple to surrender. It would be effortless to become the image they wanted. To her right, the path of silence, the long, invisible work of compounding interest. She stopped pacing and looked at the reflection in her dark window. The choice was not about money. It was about who would own her future. The pressure was a physical weight on her shoulders, a demand to prioritize the now over the later. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a steady, rhythmic pulse of resistance. She looked at the laptop screen, the cursor blinking in the dark, waiting for her to break. She stood still, breathing slowly. letting the weight of the decision settle into her bones. She was not ready to fold. Mia sat down. The wood of the desk was cool under her palms, steadying her. She opened the laptop, the screen glow casting a sharp white light across her face. Her browser was still open to the luxury brand partnership request, a flashing, persistent invitation to buy prestige. She did not click it. Instead, she moved the cursor with precise, controlled motions. She navigated away from the social dashboard, away from the notifications, and into the secure portal of her brokerage account. Her fingers hovered over the keys. There was no hesitation now. She typed the exact amount of the latest sponsorship fee, the full sum that everyone expected her to spend on display. She reviewed the transfer details. The screen displayed a prompt, confirm. She took a breath, letting the urge for validation pass through her like a fading shadow. She pressed enter. The transaction process bar filled in silence, a digital tide moving resources from the ephemeral to the permanent. The confirmation popped up in green text, small and unremarkable. She sat back, watching the page refresh. The money was gone from her spending account, moved into the foundation of her future. The digital noise of the world outside her window ceased to matter. She had made her choice. The funds sat in the account, a digital weight waiting for purpose. Mia scrolled through the options. She bypassed the high-growth, high-risk individual stocks that promised quick, volatile returns. Those were distractions, not foundations. She selected a diversified index fund, a broad engine designed to capture the growth of the entire market. Her mouse hovered over the ticker symbol. She checked the expense ratio, the historical performance, and the underlying assets one last time. Every detail was a piece of the architecture she was building. She entered the total amount, every cent of the sponsorship fee, and placed the order. The screen flickered as the request moved into the queue. A small notification bar appeared at the top of the interface. Order executed. She watched the cash balance hit 0, while the share count updated in the Holdings tab. It was done. She closed the brokerage portal and leaned back in her chair. The room remained quiet. There was no immediate transformation, no flashing lights, and no public celebration. Just the steady, invisible hum of capital beginning its work. She was no longer just a content creator. She was an investor. The engine was built, and for the first time, it was running without her constant input. The pattern took root. With every new sponsorship check that arrived, the routine repeated. Mia did not hesitate, and she did not compare her bank balance to the lifestyle of her peers. The process became mechanical, a disciplined reflex that functioned regardless of the sum involved. She watched the notifications pile up on her screen, each one a potential shortcut to immediate status, but she treated them as mere fuel for the engine. She filtered the offers, accepted the ones that required the least of her time, and funneled the entirety of the payments into her brokerage account. The cycle was relentless. She transferred funds on Tuesday afternoons, during quiet mornings, and even late at night when the rest of the digital world was churning out trends. Each transaction was a brick in an invisible fortress. Her portfolio began to compound, the numbers in her investment dashboard climbing with a steady, predictable momentum that no viral spike could match. She stopped watching the view counts on her videos as closely as she watched the growth charts of her holdings. The fame was the byproduct, but the capital was the goal. Month by month, the gap between her public profile and her private net worth widened, a secret architecture built from the refusal to consume. The lobby of the studio was packed with cameras and noise. Mia stood near the corner, checking her schedule, when a familiar face approached. It was a creator known for his constant stream of high-budget lifestyle content. He walked over, his eyes scanning Mia, not for business, but for a flaw. He paused, his gaze dropping to her feet. The surrounding crowd seemed to shrink as he tilted his head. He looked at the worn-out sneakers, then back up at her, his lips curling into a condescending smirk. He gestured at her feet, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby passers-by. He asked her how someone with her reach could possibly walk around in such a state. The question hung in the air, framed as concern but delivered as a public critique. He waited, expecting her to explain or perhaps show signs of embarrassment. The gap between the digital persona the world knew and the person standing before him was the point of his attack. He wanted her to justify the choice, to feel the weight of the social expectation he thrived on. Mia stood still, the ambient hum of the room fading into the background. The confrontation was set, and the silence from her side began to make the creator look restless. Mia did not flinch. She did not look down at her feet, nor did she offer the explanation he craved. Instead, she locked her gaze onto his, holding the connection until his smug expression faltered. The surrounding noise of the lobby seemed to dissipate, leaving only the sharp clarity of the moment. She leaned in slightly, her voice low but carrying across the small space between them. She said, "I would rather buy assets than applause." The words hit with the weight of a stone dropped in a still pool. The creator blinked, his mouth parting as he searched for a retort, but the confidence had drained from his face. He looked at her, then at the people watching, and found nothing left to say. The critique he had carefully constructed had evaporated against the cold reality of her conviction. She did not offer a secondary remark or a justification. She simply held the line, her posture firm and calm. The creator shifted his weight, muttered something unintelligible, and stepped back into the crowd. He was no longer the one setting the terms of the interaction. Mia turned away, leaving him to stand in the space where his mockery had failed. Mia walked back into the quiet of her room. The hum of the event, the cameras, and the voices from the lobby fell away, replaced by the soft, rhythmic click of her keyboard. She opened her dashboard, ready to review her latest transfer, when a notification banner slid across the top of her screen. It was an invitation from a high-end luxury brand, a partnership request promising a six-figure sum for a single series of posts. It was the kind of deal that defined success for most creators in her space. The banner pulsed, inviting a single click to accept. Mia stared at the glowing text. She thought of the hours of filming, the pressure to maintain a specific image, and the constant demand for public performance that came with such deals. She moved the cursor over the decline button. The weight of the decision was gone. The choice was instinctive. She clicked. The notification vanished, leaving her screen clean and focused on her own data. The silence of the room was no longer a void, but a foundation. She closed the window, ignoring the digital pull of the industry, and turned her attention to the growing numbers in her private portfolio. The validation she needed was no longer something she had to chase from others. The rain drummed a steady, rhythmic beat against the window pane, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon. Inside the room, the only light came from the monitor, bathing the desk in a cool blue glow. Mia sat perfectly still. She placed her fingers on the keyboard and tapped the refresh icon on her dashboard. The page flickered, the loading bar crawled across the screen, and then the data populated. A single figure held the center of the display. It was a 7-digit number. She stared at the digits, not moving, not breathing. The total represented every morning she had spent working while others slept, every dollar she had redirected from immediate consumption into long-term growth. The reality of the sum settled into the room, heavy and absolute. There was no sudden rush of adrenaline, no urge to celebrate or broadcast the news. Instead, a deep, steady calm took hold. The pressure that had defined her daily life for 2 years simply dissipated. She leaned back in her chair, the hard edge of the wood pressing against her spine. It was done. The goal she had chased through years of isolation and doubt had finally materialized, confirmed in black and white on the screen before her. Mia reached forward and pressed the power button. The screen went black, the blue light vanishing instantly, leaving the room in shadows. She stood up, feeling the blood return to her legs after hours of stillness. She walked to the window and pressed her palms against the cool glass. Outside, the city was alive with movement. Thousands of lights flickered in the distance, each one representing a different ambition, a different race for attention. She watched them with a quiet detachment. For years, those lights had been her compass, the source of the views and the metrics that dictated her worth. Now, they were just lights. She had used the energy of the viral world to build a foundation that sat beneath the noise, a structure of her own making that would stand long after the trends faded. Her breath fogged the glass, masking the view for a second before clearing. She felt no need to reach for her phone or check for new notifications. The engine she had built was running on its own, fueled by years of small, disciplined choices. The city lights continued to pulse, but she was no longer part of their rhythm. She was finally, completely free.